And we're on. I'm just going to get down to this and not do so much of an introduction. I've not been fully myself with the previous episodes. It's sort of been like I've been dipping my toe in, and I've not really talked about what I want to talk about. And I've not wanted to talk about anything controversial, but equally that I'm not passionate about. It's more being about, hoo-ha moments rather than this is what we're about here. On my TikTok channel, I'm pretty much all about PMDD truths and traumas, and I'm using makeup and self-care as a way to become whole, as a way to heal from that. I'm going to talk about today my journey, my life with PMDD. If you didn't know, it is a premenstruational dysphoric disorder. I'm going to talk about some of the milestones that happened to me, some of the discoveries, the HerShift moments, and I've got a lot to say, and I've got very strong opinions and probably quite dividing opinions on the subject, especially considering that I'm not a medical professional. I am, however, a woman, and I am a woman that has suffered from this. I am also a woman who has recovered from this and has shown that you can be healed and you can fix it. But it's not going to be in the way that you probably would know about or be told in the past. And I know people are going to disagree with me on this, but this is my experience, this is my belief, and this is what I want to put out there. Okay. I think that, firstly, I don't like PMDD being put in the same mix as PMS. It's almost like they're saying it's an extreme version of PMS. And I don't think it is, because I don't think it's the same thing that causes it. I get that it's a hormonal response, absolutely, and it can link to your period cycle. But other than that, I think it's actually very dangerous to put them in the same group together. And the reason is, for the longest time, I thought I just had PMS, and I thought I couldn't handle it. I thought I was a flake. And this only added to my guilt and my shame and my erosion of worthiness. It just was like, I am an absolute weak woman. Because I see, other women suffering from PMS and it's talked about. And yet I cannot function when I'm suffering. So I want to go back to the beginning and know that I'm not going to talk too excessively about my childhood or my adolescence, but of course I did start my periods when I was 10, which was quite early, but I was well into puberty at that point. So I'm 5'6" and a bit now, and I was also that height when I was 10. I was also the same shoe size I was then, so it was kind of inevitable. But I was obviously far from being mature enough to be able to handle it. From then on, it was kind of said to me, time of the month, or moody teenager, she's always been a nightmare, this sort of thing. And I just never linked the two. I just thought I was a moody cow in general, and I was a stroppy bitch, and I just wasn't a very nice person because I was told I wasn't. I was very hard to live with. I was very dramatic. And I just thought that was all the time. Now, throughout teenage years, I did have massive bouts of depression. But again, I never made the link. I'm going to be honest, I never charted my periods. I never bothered putting them into a calendar. I wasn't shown or told to do so I didn't know you could do that. And also, I had irregular periods. So again, it was almost like I never made the connection between having this severe, debilitating bout of depression and associated it with my menstrual cycle. When I was in my 20s, I was very close to my mother-in-law, and I miss her very much. She took a great interest in me in a motherly sense, and she noticed these times when I was struggling, and we talk about it. And she was also a receptionist at a doctor's practice, and she'd been for many years. And I always think that someone who works in that capacity must have access to such a wealth of knowledge. They must see and hear conversations, and obviously they're not medical professionals, but I think they're certainly going to be really in tune to certain things. And Jane, my mother-in-law as well, was a very intelligent lady. So she started to say, are you struggling today? And if I said yes, she went, when was your period? And I'd tell her, no issue. And I'd notice she'd start to write it down in her calendar, which was just amusing. And after a few months, she said to me, you do realise that your moods seem to be in the second part of your cycle. Now, back then, my cycle was still weird in that it was probably every 45 days, and sometimes longer. And she'd made this connection. So for the first time ever, I had this link between the two things. It's like how I'm feeling and my cycle. Okay, right. Okay, I can work with that. I still didn't really take it too seriously. Of course, again, I thought, well, it's PMS. I'd never heard of PMDD, and I don't think this would have been in the early noughties. I don't think it would have shown up, and you couldn't Google things like that then anyway, so the knowledge just wasn't out there. My suffering was so bad in that every debilitating symptom. So physically, it was like having really bad flu every month, usually for about 10 days for me. I would sweat and I would shake and I would get hot and cold. I would feel aches and pains and heaviness. I would sometimes have dizziness, occasional vomiting. I would have tummy cramps and diarrhea. All of that, though, I could handle to a point. As us women, we do. I can handle this. But what I really struggled with was the mental effects. The mental effects, I probably still find hard to talk about what it actually would do to me. Obviously, it was extreme depression, anxiety, overwhelm, lack of mental clarity, brain fog, lack of memory, forgetfulness, anger, which I couldn't fully express, rage, just not wanting to be here, just wanting a way out. It was just not being able to handle minor inconveniences in my day as if they were huge things. One time I forgot how to drive for 10 seconds and crashed the car. It would start probably 2 weeks to 10 days before my period and progressively get worse. Interestingly, during this time, often I would be having an argument with my husband during what we call Hell Week, although it's often longer than a week. And we'd be having an argument and I would storm upstairs. And when I was upstairs, I would get my period. And then I would come back down and the birds would be singing and the sun would be out and I'd be happy. And it'd even go, have you got your period? You're like a different person. It was like night and day. Now, I know for everyone that's not always the case. You might get your period and slowly come out of your slump, or it might be made worse and get better in a few days. But that was how it was for me. My symptoms would get worse and worse and worse, up until the point where I would want to unlife myself, and then I would get my period and I would just be like, the relief that would come with that. I now realise, though, that when I wasn't on Hell Week, that was still a really bad time. It's just that in comparison to Hell Week, it was easier. I think I've mentioned it before. It was like saying, if Hell Week is like being homeless and in the rain with no food and no water, the time when you're not on Hell Week is just being homeless. Neither are particularly favourable positions to be in, but you would definitely choose one over the other. And it's not until you're not experiencing that you think, oh God, my levels of acceptability are so low because of what I've been through. Another thing you'd find that when you weren't on Hell Week, you would spend the rest of the month trying to mend and get the situation better. So any damage that you'd done, any relationships you thought that you'd ruined, you had to play catch up for the rest of the time. Now, I always wanted to know what was causing strange, behaviour, such mood swings, such physical reaction. Now, I found out pretty early on that it was hormones. It was like a reaction, like my hormones were obviously spiking or going all over the place. And to be fair, that's what, PMS is. It's obviously milder, but the hormones at that point, usually from the time you ovulate, go a little bit crazy, and they cause, the symptoms that I've just discussed. However, and this is where I'm going to have an opinion. So with PMS, I believe what causes those is obviously the hormones spike, and what causes the hormones to spike is diet, lifestyle, stress, lack of exercise. Now, it could be other medical things too. Yes, of course, it's like polycystic ovary syndrome, things like that. So I'm saying it's just a simple lifestyle change. There could be something else going on. But to generalize it, I think that's what PMS is. And those things can be controlled. And I think that a difference in things like lifestyle, exercise, diet would have an effect quite quickly. Now here's the thing, this is like a shifting moment for me. I just thought, if I can control my hormones, then I won't have Hell Week anymore, and then I will be okay. Because that is what we're told. That is, if you go to a doctor, they're like, right, we can give you HIT, we can give you hormone treatment, an extreme, but we can give you a hysterectomy, because if we remove that, then you're not going to have a spike in hormones anymore. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It never occurred to me to ask further and go, but really, what is causing such an extreme spike in hormones or drop in hormones? And looking back, I can't believe they didn't want to know either. They just put it down to being a woman. It's unfortunate. It's luck of the draw. If your mum had it, if your grandmother had it, you've had it. I never thought to consider that. Things got so bad a few years ago, and we're getting to a point where I cannot live like this. I have got so much potential, and I'm not living. I'm just waiting every month to get through. And I cannot live like this. And at this point, I tried lots of different things. I tried hormonal treatments. I'd had the Marina coil, which had worked really well actually for me, because it had used, I think it's full of progesterone, which is what my body is lacking, and it gave me that instant soothing effect. What I'm going to explain next is probably the reason why it didn't work indefinitely. Okay. So I believe that PMDD is a manifestation of unresolved trauma. That is what is causing the hormones to do what they're doing. And if it wasn't manifesting like that, it would be manifesting somewhere else. It would show up as either acute depression, it would be like a personality disorder, it would show in some other way. And I believe, so trauma is not the event itself, it's the effect it has, that the body's response to it. It's the body's response to the event which becomes trauma. And I believe that even when I went private, at that point, my body had so much unresolved trauma in it. It was screaming from the inside out. It was screaming. My soul was screaming. It was an alarm bell going off. Blinking, blinking, blinking. Please listen to me, please. And what did I do? I thought, if I can just shut you off, turn you off, silence you, I'm going to be fine. When I went private, I had a blood test done. They were very detailed, unlike the ones that you would get on the NHS. It was very interesting to get these blood test results back, and I had them done at a certain point during my cycle, and I had to fast before having them. For anyone who wants to know, they weren't, what I would say, ridiculously expensive. I think they were about £400. So, and it was at that point where I'm thinking, you know what, that for me would be £400 spent. I need to get to the bottom of this. When the results came back, there was a few things, up and down. It was very interesting. But the biggest problem was how estrogen dominant I was. And from reading, I think that a normal amount of estrogen in the blood per mil would be between 30 and 80 during this period in your cycle. And mine came back at over 1200. And when the doctor read that back to me, and this was a lovely female gynecologist who worked in these issues, she said, "Well, my love, I don't know how you're functioning." And I said, "Well, I'm not. This was the reason I'd got these blood tests was because I was having a dark night of the soul. I was just literally, I could have done a better job at that time. I was just an absolute shell, an absolute mess. I was barely functioning." And she said, "Right, so we're going to prescribe identical hormones, and we're going to rebalance you, and we're going to get your progesterone levels up." And looking back, again, I never asked the question, but what is causing that? I mean, that's an extreme level of estrogen in my body. I mean, that, and like I said, it's not PMS, that's extreme. There's no amount of diet or exercise or lifestyle change that's going to dramatically lower that. Maybe a bit, definitely, it'll help, but extreme. What's causing it? Which is where I go back to the whole PMDD for me is unresolved trauma. And understanding that and accepting that, I think, is half the battle. It's realizing that you need to basically go and sort your shit out. You need to go and do the work. You need to dig deep. You need to release these traumas, these things that have happened to you. And I know there's a lot of people that will probably rather live with PMDD forever and have to do that. It is, I'm going to warn you, a bit like Pandora's box. Once you start, you can't stop. You can't unknow what you then know. For me personally, it led me down a path of discovery that involved abusive childhood, a few events of trauma, abusive relationships, which now looking back I was just trying to silence my soul. Doing the work has been the hardest thing I have ever had to do, but I do believe that is what recovery from PMDD does. I believe that even if I didn't have a period now, and if I'd had a hysterectomy, and once I'm menopausal, that if I hadn't have done the work, if I hadn't have released the trauma from my body, it would have shown up in other ways for the rest of my life. And that probably would have been extreme depression. Because I wouldn't have a cycle anymore, it probably wouldn't be half a month, it would probably be intermittent for the rest of my life. If you're wondering like how long recovery takes, I think obviously everybody is different, but I do believe that it's knowing this and having this information and me sharing this with you now. Hopefully you can go, you know what, that makes sense. And if I jump off this cliff and start to do the work and unravel what's gone on and have in my head that it is possible to heal, it is possible to recover from PMDD and the trauma that causes it, then I think that you're more than halfway there. I think it's a never-ending journey. I think it's a lot of self-awareness and a lot of check-ins. It's incredibly scary. And I think support is probably the thing that's lacking in this world when it comes to this condition that women suffer from. And that's why I wanted to start this HerShift movement, and it's why I want to do this podcast, and it's why I go on TikTok. I'm still scared. I'm facing my fears every day when I'm talking about this. But I know this won't be the last time I talk about it. And I know this is going to be my raw and unedited version of the start of HerShift movement with the truths of PMDD. But before I go, I'm going to say that anyone who has resonated with what I'm saying, who has experienced anything of what I've talked about, who is suffering from PMDD or certainly has had trauma in their life, I see you and I believe you. You're not on your own. It's going to be okay. And mainly, I want you to know that you are doing amazing. And if you're struggling to be proud of yourself right now, which I know is one of the things that happens with this condition, I want you to know that your future self is absolutely fucking inspired, awesome, proud of you. And I am. If you've got to the end of this and it hasn't been too heavy and you think, there might be something there, and you want to chat with me, or you want to leave me a message, I would absolutely love that. You can find me over at TikTok at the Anna PR, and you can find me on Instagram at the same. And you can email me at anna@annacordelia.com. I hope this is the first me jumping off a cliff episode podcast of many. And until the next time I do this, I'm just going to say, I'm here. I see you. Keep going. You can do it.